Do you ever let cultural convenience rewrite your convictions? Do you trade loyalty for compromise? Well, notice this. The small compromises that one makes with the world can actually quickly erode worship. And in Deuteronomy chapter 7, we'll actually unpack how God's command to reject assimilative practices, instead to trust his election, will actually protect covenant purity. And I'll give you one immediate action to keep your devotion from being softened by culture in this episode of Biblical Unlocks. This show is designed to help build your habit of reading the Bible, understanding the Bible, and applying it in your daily life. If you enjoy episodes like this, please consider following and rating the show. It's free, it helps me out a lot, and you can always change your mind later. Now let's get a little bit of context into the chapter. Okay, so Deuteronomy chapter 7 commands Israel to destroy the Canaanite altars, to avoid intermarriage, and refuse the religious practices of the nations. And remember that God chose them by grace, not by merit. And the chapter actually ties holy separateness to God's own covenantal purposes. Israel's distinctiveness protects the community from spiritual corruption. And what's important from all of this is that it preserves the means of blessings for the future generations. Okay, let's read verses 1 to 6. The focus here is going to be the command to break covenant ties with the Canaanite nations. And the engagement question for you to stay focused here is, why do we need to sever ties instead of absorbing the local practices? Verse 1. When the Lord your God brings you into the land that you are about to enter and occupy, and he clears away many nations before you, the Hittites, the Girgashites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, 7 nations more numerous and mightier than you, and when the Lord your God gives them over to you, and you defeat them, then you must utterly destroy them, make no covenant with them, and show them no mercy. Do not intermarry with them, giving your daughters to their sons, or taking their daughters for your sons. For that would turn away your children from following me to serve other gods. Then the anger of the Lord would be kindled against you, and he would destroy you quickly. But this is how you must deal with them. Break down their altars, smash their pillars, cut down their sacred poles, and burn their idols with fire. For you are a people holy to the Lord your God. The Lord your God has chosen you out of all of the peoples on this earth to be his people, his treasured possession. Okay, so he starts off very strong, right? So what does God tell Israel to destroy altars and avoid intermarriage? Isn't this a very extreme? So biblical unlock number 1 is that the prohibition actually targets religious assimilation. It's not necessarily an ethnic sort of reason, right? It's not that intermarriage is banned in this particular section. It's just that the intermarriage can actually be linked to foreign worship, which actually threatened Israel's covenant fidelity. The law here functions as a firewall. It prevents corrupting practices from seeding the community. Or in other words, separation here is about protecting worship. It's not cultural arrogance. In order to protect worship, we have to remember what the Shema says in Deuteronomy chapter 6, right? Deuteronomy chapter 6 verse 4, it says that you should love only the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, and your mind. And we remember that God and the relationship we have with God is like a marriage between a husband and a wife, and a wife or a husband should not have to share their spouse with false relationships or false idols, right? It is a one-to-one relationship. Okay, let's read verses 7 to 11 now. This is going to be God's election and covenantal love. And the engagement question here for you to stay focused is, how does being chosen by grace change how we live among others? Verse 7, it was not because you were more numerous than any other people that the Lord set his heart on you and chose you, for you were the fewest of all peoples. It was because the Lord loved you and kept the oath that he swore to your ancestors, that the Lord has brought you out with a mighty hand and redeemed you from the house of slavery, from the hand of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. Now, therefore, that the Lord your God is God, the faithful God who maintains covenant loyalty with those who love him and keep his commandments to 1,000 generations, and who repays in their own person those who reject him. He does not delay, but repays in their own person those who reject him. Therefore, observe diligently the commandment, the statutes, and the ordinances that I am commanding you today. So, the second section here, biblical unlock number 2. If God chose Israel, does that make them better than anyone else? The idea here is, again, no. God's choice is gracious. It is not merit-based, right? It is not merit-based. The chapter actually stresses humility. Israel is chosen so that God's name and purposes might spread, and the election carries responsibility. Chosen people are actually stewards of revelation, and they are called to model faithful life for the nations, right? And in fact, harsher judgment will be cast upon Israel themselves, because even though they knew the truth of the Lord, they refused to obey His ordinances, His statutes, and because of that, responsibility is also added to this level of election. So that's important. It's not through your own work, but rather God's election of you. A theme which is going to become reoccurring in the New Testament. Okay, let's read verses 12 to 16 now. This is going to be a warning against adopting pagan worship practices and their consequences. And the engagement question for you to stay focused is, what happens when worship is syncretized with culture? Verse 12. If you heed these ordinances by diligently observing them, the Lord your God will maintain with you the covenant loyalty that He swore to your ancestors. He will love you, bless you, and multiply you. He will bless the fruit of your womb and the fruit of your ground, your grain and your wine and your oil, and the increase of your cattle, and the issue of your flock in the land that He swore to your ancestors to give you. You shall be the most blessed of peoples, with neither sterility nor barrenness among you or your livestock. The Lord will turn away from you every illness, all the dread diseases of Egypt that you experienced. He will not inflict on you, but He will lay them on all who hate you. You shall devour all the peoples that the Lord your God is giving over to you, showing them no pity. You shall not serve their gods, for that would be a snare to you. Alright, biblical unlock number 3. What's the real danger of adopting local religious practices? This is a concept called syncretism, right? You're adopting local religious or pagan practices. What happens with syncretism is that it slowly replaces covenant worship with hybrid rituals that obscure God's character and distort moral life. One of the key characteristics of the entire biblical narrative is that there is one God who you must devote your entire attention towards. Augustine says that the Lord has made us for Himself, and our hearts are restless until they rest in Him. One of the real reasons, or one of the most prominent reasons why people struggle with meaning, they struggle with determining their life's purposes, because they're incapable of recognizing that God is meant to fill the void that simply cannot be filled by relationships, career, personal possessions, even material possessions. All of these things fail to fill that void that is present and gaping in the human conditions. That existential dread, why we are here, what is our purpose, why do we need to do anything, what is the ultimate reason for all of the things that we experience? And the answer actually finds itself in God's character. But the moment we start to substitute that for other related reasons, when we start worshipping creation more than creator, that is precisely when we will begin the slow level of syncretism that replaces that covenant fidelity, that worship we have, and that begins to obscure God's character. The idea here is that we start to lose our identity, we start to compromise our morals, and we will eventually be judged, because what shapes worship shapes our behavior. Okay, let's read verses 17 to 26. This is the final part of the chapter. This is the promise of blessing if Israel obeys. And my engagement question, so that you stay focused through this section, is, how does obedience to holiness connect with communal flourishing? Verse 17. If you say to yourself, these nations are more numerous than I, how can I dispossess them? Do not be afraid of them. Just remember what the Lord your God did to Pharaoh and to all Egypt, the great trials that your eyes saw, the signs and wonders, the mighty hand and the outstretched arm by which the Lord your God brought you out. The Lord your God will do the same to all the peoples of whom you are afraid. Moreover, the Lord your God will send swarms of hornets against them until even the survivors and fugitives are destroyed. Have no dread of them, for the Lord your God who is present with you is a great and awesome God. The Lord your God will clear away these nations before you little by little. You will not be able to make a quick end of them, otherwise the wild animals would become too numerous for you. But the Lord your God will give them over to you and throw them into great panic until they are destroyed. He will hand their kings over to you, and you shall blot out their name from under heaven. No one will be able to stand against you until you have destroyed them. The images of their gods you shall burn with fire. Do not covet the silver or the gold that is on them, and take it for yourself, because you could be ensnared by it, for it is abhorrent to the Lord your God. Do not bring an abhorrent thing into your house, or you will be set apart for destruction like it. You must utterly detest and abhor it, for it is set apart for destruction. Final biblical unlock, number 4. How does obeying prohibitions about idols actually lead to blessings? We can see here there's quite harsh language. The image of their gods you shall burn with fire. Do not covet the silver or the gold that is on them. Take it for yourself, because you could be ensnared by it, for it is abhorrent to the Lord your God. Do not bring an abhorrent thing into your house, and so on and so forth. So the idea here is that obedience protects the community's spiritual soil so that God's presence can prosper them, whether it be families, crops, and national reputation. All of these flourish when covenant faithfulness is what guides choice. The promise here links holiness and communal, or the flourishing of the community, and faithfulness is what secures this blessing. So, faithfulness, staying true to one God, the one and true and the only God, is what is necessary. And notice what it says: do not covet the silver or the gold that is on them, and take it for yourself. That's in verse 25, because you could become ensnared by it, for it is abhorrent to the Lord your God. Remember what I said before: a tree falls the way it leans. Whether you silently or minimally engage in sin, it doesn't matter. It's posture of your heart, right? It is where your heart is tending towards and where it is leaning. And if you lean in a certain direction, you will fall in that direction. Let's see how this chapter fulfills Jesus Christ. Okay, so how does this chapter fulfill Jesus Christ? Deuteronomy 7 actually calls us to exclusive loyalty and holy separateness, right? Which ultimately finds its fulfillment in Christ. Jesus embodies the faithful Israel God intended: perfect obedience, loving God supremely, and fulfilling the law's aim to form a people who reflect God's character. Where Deuteronomy guards against syncretism, that is, incorporating other religious practices into your own beliefs, right, by erecting boundary markers, Christ overcomes the root problem of the heart. He renews desires so that God's people naturally hate what corrupts worship and love what preserves covenant life. And I want to read this verse. This verse is Matthew chapter 6, verse 21, where Jesus says, "For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." So, where is your treasure is ultimately in material possessions. That is where your heart will be. If your treasure is ultimately in your personal relationships, that is where your heart will be. But if your treasure is ultimately in God, in Jesus Christ, there your heart will be also. The only difference here is that God has your best intentions in mind. Everyone is ultimately a slave to something and will worship something. Why not worship the only thing that has your best interests in mind? Okay, so practical applications of this chapter. I want to point out that syncretism, right, including other gods and worship rituals and stuff like that, it can seem quite detached from a contemporary setting. So what I wanted to do is reframe this slightly, right? So the cultural habits that you may have absorbed that might blur worship, whether it be media, festivals, phrases, stuff like this, you need to ask, is this pointing me towards God or to something else, right? And you need to remove or reframe it if it's pointing you to something else. And the second thing is, you need to be able to recognize why we cannot worship other gods. It is not merely a fact of preference. I'm going to worship this God out of a particular preference, right? That's not the point. The point is, whether it be money, status, or pleasure, you must pray together. Ask God to protect your heart from small compromises. This is the key, because as I said before, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. You don't want to substitute God for some material, perishable good. Alright, well that's it for this episode of Biblical Unlocks. We learned that Deuteronomy chapter 7 prevents us from assimilating religious practices that would otherwise dilute our worship. And this is practical in a contemporary sense as well. with regards to all of the things that we devote our attention to, our worship to, in a sense, right? So God's election is gracious. It calls Israel to responsibility, not arrogant pride, right? So obedience here is connected with the blessing as well. Faithfulness secures God's presence and provision. Next time, we're going to move from holiness to dependence in Deuteronomy chapter 8. We'll explore the wilderness testing, the danger of forgetting God in prosperity, and how humility before God secures real worship. You don't want to miss it. So if you enjoyed the show, please consider rating the show and following. It's free, it helps me out a lot, and you can always change your mind later. Otherwise, just have a blessed day. And remember, if you're not in your word, you're in your feelings. Godspeed.